Hey everyone, welcome to Flutter Atlanta. Thanks to everybody that came in person. We have several of you guys tuning in online. Thank you guys for checking us out and listening in to our talk about just the state of Flutter in 2024. Really quick before we get started, I just want to give a quick explanation on the odd layout on the live stream tonight. Our setup in person is like a 3x3 screen array, and our top left screen is out. So I've just put the YouTube chat on the left here, so we have our presentation going on the right. So sorry for the inconvenience. We're still getting that screen fixed, and hopefully we'll have it fixed for you guys by next meetup. Also for the people here, we're using the mics in the ceiling, so anything you say will be on the YouTube stream. So if you ask any questions, just know they'll be able to hear it. And don't say anything you don't want on the internet. Awesome. So my name is Emmett Dean. I'm an engineering manager over the Flutter team here at Black Airplane. I have a background in native Android and iOS development. I've been using Flutter for a little over 4 years now. Built over 20 apps in Flutter at this point, and we have several more in progress. And I love Flutter so much that I use it for my own projects. I want to give a quick shout out to Black Airplane. That's the physical location that we're at here in Woodstock, Georgia. I want to give them a shout out for letting us use this awesome space and also providing pizza and beer. Black Airplane is a leading development agency in the Southeast, and we have a really special team here that produces top quality work, and we're capable of building pretty much anything these days. So if you need help with a project, reach out to us. So again, today we're going to be talking about the state of the Flutterverse. We figured this would be a good way to kick off our 2024 content calendar, just to get everybody up to speed on some of the various things that have been going on. So let's dive in. First, let's take a look at some stats. I pulled these stats from a website called App Figures. They're a competitor of App Annie and Sensor Tower, and they provide a lot of good insights to see what tools are being used to actually build apps these days. So it's really great to see Flutter, even though it's such a young framework, now makes up about 8% of the apps on the App Store and 16% of the apps on the Google Play Store. We've passed React Native on Google Play, and we're really catching up to them on the Apple side. So super exciting to see. And as always, we always check in on this stat. Flutter also has 159,000 stars on GitHub now, and just to, of course, always compare it to React Native, they only have 114,000 stars, and both of these stats are of January 2024. So Flutter is still growing really rapidly in popularity, both being used actually in production apps, and is also really well loved by the development community behind it. Now, let's look at some of the biggest Flutter improvements in 2023. And the way I'm picking these to share is I basically went on the GitHub issues for Flutter, and then I sorted by upvotes from the actual community, and I picked some of the biggest ones that were improvements as new features. So the first one, which if you're an iOS developer, you're going to love this, is wireless debugging on iOS. This came out last year. So it used to be you would have to plug in your device to be able to run your Flutter app physically on it. Now we finally have support for the wireless Xcode setup. This ticket was opened, I think, in either 2018 or 2019. So it's really great to see this finally come into reality here in 2023. Great, just life, quality of life improvement. Next is an enhancement for some of your actual web apps or maybe your desktop apps, which is drag and drop across the Flutter boundary. So October of 2023, we got support for drag and drop, like as if you were going to drag an image from another application into Flutter. So this is another one of those things that, of course, for web apps or desktop apps is kind of expected to be able to do. So it's really good to see us finally get some functionality like this. Next was a really big performance increase for Flutter Web. This was a really big talk at Flutter Interact about WebAssembly for Flutter Web. So this is now completely available. Instead of compiling with JavaScript, you can use WebAssembly, and you're going to get a lot of performance benefits from that as well. So those were some of the top issues that did get fixed in 2023, and some of the improvements that the community really wanted. But what are some of the things that we still want fixed? GitHub, on GitHub, there's over 5,000 issues still with Flutter. Issues are either bugs or new feature requests. So again, looking at what does the Flutter community want most going into 2024? The most upvoted one is code push. This is something the React Native community has been holding over the Flutter community for quite a while. And this is something called code push, where essentially you can release a fix for a bug in your app without having to resubmit through app review. There's been a whole bunch of talks back and forth around if you can actually do this with Apple and Google terms of service, because they don't want you to push updates without it going through review. But React Native's had this forever. It's become an expectation for a lot of companies because they want to have the ability to hotfix something quickly. And code push, while this is an open issue here, there is a team working on this that really highly regarded team on a startup called Shorebird. So we are going to be getting this pretty soon. They already, I think, have either alpha or beta out. So a lot of times with these packages or these requests, there's actually going to be an open source community behind it, or somebody will come and make a package that'll solve that issue. So it may not be built into Flutter itself, but the Flutter team will recognize a team that's built a solution and recommend an official package to use to accomplish this. That's probably what will happen here. But as you can see, tons of upvotes. This is the #1 upvoted thing that has not been accomplished yet. Next is the Flutter Homebrew installation. If you've ever set up Flutter on your device or multiple devices, you'll know that you have to either install it via Git or download a zip and set it up. It's not a terrible setup process, but for most of us that work on Mac OS, Homebrew is the simplest way to get these things set up. This has been open for quite a while, and I think a lot of people would really benefit from this now that when you get new laptops, getting this set up quickly, getting your various team members set up quickly, Homebrew would just be a great quality of life addition for setting up Flutter. Next is hot reload for web. So we have hot reload on Android and iOS, which is great. It's one of the most loved features for Flutter, which is essentially you can edit the code and basically hit save, and it'll show up on the screen without you having to rerun a build. We do have a hot restart on web, which will restart the entire app, and that's pretty convenient, but we do not have hot reload yet. I think this is a really exciting request to see the number of upvotes, purely because it means a lot of people are using Flutter Web. People want to use Flutter for the web. There's just not an entire feature set there yet to completely replace modern web frameworks. I think we're getting closer and closer, but as you'll see from some of the other requests, there's some very key things that we still need support for first before we can really take it to modern web frameworks. And the next one is going to be, of course, the SEO for Flutter web apps. This is probably Flutter's biggest pitfall when it comes to Flutter web, and that is due to the way that Flutter renders on web. They essentially use a canvas element and render everything pixel by pixel, which means there's no crawlable DOM for all of the Google bots, the Bing bots, all of that. So that means the actual search engines can't interpret what is going on the web page, which means your SEO is terrible. So with that being said, there's a lot of people that have requested this. There's been some back and forth with the core Flutter team about saying Flutter is for apps and not for web pages, so we don't need SEO support. But then a lot of people are saying for e-commerce apps, we absolutely must have SEO support. So there's some back and forth debate there. It is a high priority. Obviously, it's been open since 2019, so there hasn't been movement on it yet, but hopefully we'll see some improvements here soon. If you are really interested in SEO with Flutter, people have made some kind of black hat packages to make it work, where they'll essentially render the DOM underneath the Flutter canvas, so it still shows up for the Google bot, all the content you're showing, and then renders the Flutter page on top of it. There's all sorts of debates on whether this is allowed with the Google bot. It's a technique called cloaking, and generally it's not a good thing to do because you could show to the Google bot different information than you're showing to a user, and that is considered a reason that you could get basically blocked by Google bot. So it's something to keep an eye out for. Next is CarPlay and Android Auto support. This is also really fun. CarPlay and Android Auto is becoming extremely popular basically in every single new car that's coming out now. Having support for more destinations as a Flutter developer is always exciting. we are already spoiled and have more than any other framework out there, being able to deploy for Android, iOS, Mac OS, Linux, Windows, web, and also embedded systems. We have a lot of places where we can deploy our code. Adding Apple CarPlay and Android Auto would just be a great tool to have in your back pocket. Next goes back to web, and this ticket actually kind of spurred out of the SEO conversation, which is server-side rendering for Flutter Web. A lot of the modern web frameworks out there use this tool to both speed up load times and SEO performance. So with Flutter Web, because of the unique way it renders, some people were talking about basically doing server-side rendering for your Flutter Web apps to solve a lot of the issues that you get with a normal Flutter Web app. And Flutter Web apps typically load as a single-page application, which means you have a really large JavaScript bundle that downloads as you arrive on the web page. So you have slow initial load times on web and weak SEO support. So server-side rendering is a proposed solution to help solve both of those issues. Now let's look at some new examples for some showcase apps. I want to just call out a couple of new apps that got added to Flutter's official showcase in 2023, just showing that there are some top apps out there that are still getting built in Flutter. The first one of these is called Betterment, and this is an investing app. Really popular, got out on the Flutter showcase. They use this again to help improve feature parity between Android and iOS and help save development costs. So if you want some good examples of just popular existing Flutter apps. Another one is called Market Watch, and this is actually a stock trading game. So not a real stock trading application, but it allows you to kind of simulate trades and learn about day trading. And then of course, PUBG Mobile. PUBG Mobile, the game itself is not built in Flutter, but all of the social elements around it are. So they use this to help connect millions of players of PUBG Mobile. So it's a good example of showing Flutter can be added to other complex apps and really help them scale. I do want to call out a little bit of internal team drama on the Flutter team. This last year, we did have two important people leave the Flutter team for various reasons. One of those is Hixie. You'll probably see his name all over various Flutter issues on GitHub, and then also Tim Sneath. So Hixie left a very emotional post about his departure from Google after 18 years, largely due to cultural issues. I can leave a link for that in the YouTube video if you want to read about it. It's very heartfelt. The Flutter community is super thankful for everything that Hixie has done, but it's important to note if you're very invested in a framework when the important players leave. Another one of those is Tim Sneath. Tim Sneath left earlier last year, and he was a big influencer for Flutter in the Twitter space and pushed it and really helped grow the community. Tim Sneath ended up leaving Flutter and is now a part of the Swift UI team. It's been really interesting following him after the Swift UI switch because after being a Flutter purist for so long, he's starting to call out things that Swift UI does better than Flutter and challenging his existing Flutter community to try and make it happen. So it's been really exciting to see interesting, almost developer marketing tactic by Apple hiring such an influential person in the developer space. Just something to keep an eye on. Whenever there's cultural issues at a company and you're very invested in a framework, just a good idea to keep an eye on it. And don't worry, we still have the same arguments and it's just a new year. The number one debate amongst Flutter devs remains to be state management. I would even venture to say it's probably going to be worse this year than ever before. The main leaders are still pulling away, but there's more state management options than ever. So again, some of these are going to be provider, block, riverpod, getx, mobx, redux, and the just general set state. There's tons of them out there. They go on forever. It's even getting painful to a point where some Flutter talent is going to know getx really well, some is going to know block really well, some are going to know riverpod really well, and depending on if they have experience in other state management libraries, they may not be proficient in some projects. So it's really important to look out if you're going to be hiring Flutter talent this year. Make sure they're at least somewhat familiar or highly trainable in the packages and state management systems that you're using on your specific apps. This is something that's been painful for the Flutter community forever. I imagine it always will be. Hopefully we'll continue to improve, and if you are a Flutter developer, the best thing you can do is try all of these, pick the one that you feel most comfortable with, and be happy and build as many apps as possible with it. Next, I just want to take a quick look at our local community, and Flutter Atlanta is still going very strong. In fact, I would say we're taking over this year. Our Flutter Atlanta meetup group is up to 499 members, so if you want to be our 500th member, please go sign up for meetup and join. We're still a part of the Flutter Meetup Network, and we are honestly going to have one of our best years yet. Our YouTube channel is also growing. Thank you to everybody that's tuning in and sharing the chat messages. We'll go through those at the end. We're up to 183 subscribers, over 23 talks on there. And it's been great. We have several talks now that are getting multiple hundreds of views, even some with over 1,000 views. So it's been great to see the virtual support. Hopefully you guys enjoy these live streams, and if you do, make sure you leave a thumbs up, share it with any of your other Flutter developer friends. Also, what I'm most excited about, if you've been following for a while, over the last 2 years, we've really been kind of slowly building this thing. We've had a lot of meetups where we've had really low attendance, but this last year we really started to hit some decent momentum, and we finally have gotten enough people to sign up to do some guest talks in 2024. So for the first year, I won't be doing all of these talks. So everyone that stuck through all of my talks last year, thank you so much. I'll still be doing a lot of talks this year, but we finally have some people in the community that are going to be talking on some really interesting topics that they're really passionate about. So first up is going to be Danielle. She is part of the Flutterista group. She's going to be talking about the new Flutter Casual Games toolkit. Carden is going to be talking about how to properly test your app. Steven, who's here today, thank you for coming, is going to be talking about developing Flutter apps on GitHub's code spaces. And then Mike will actually be doing 2 talks. He is a super senior mobile architect at Capgemini. He doesn't have a lot of Flutter experience, but he brings a lot of experience with mobile app development in general. And also, he's been through an awesome career at Apple, IBM, and some other awesome places. So he's going to be doing a talk on what he does today with solution architecture, and then also about career management as a developer. So super excited for those. That's what I'm most excited about for 2024. It's going to be great getting everybody involved in speaking and just getting some variety for the Flutter Atlanta community. So next time we're going to be talking about that Flutter Casual Games toolkit. Danielle's going to be doing that presentation. So I hope you guys come in person for that, tune in online. It's going to be great. Does anybody have any questions? Got some online. Randall's talking about a package called Jasper that can embed Flutter widgets and do SSR. Not out of the box Flutter Web, but a potential solution if you do want some of those features. Something to look into if you're a Flutter web dev. Do y'all have any questions?
Who are the other ones? Puro and
Puro. We'll pull up Shorebird too. For managing various Flutter versions. That would be probably compared to Homebrew, and then Shorebird. That didn't work. Probably Shorebird.dev. Flutter code. The team here is extremely impressive. Founder of Flutter, creator of one of the most popular Flutter state management systems, and former architecture lead for Google's internal-facing enterprise Flutter team. This is definitely a package that you can trust, and this most definitely will be the Flutter recommended packages for code push here very soon. Honestly, it looks like it's pretty much ready to go now, supports all Android and iOS devices. I wouldn't be surprised if we see that open issue close soon, with this being the recommendation.
do you have any predictions for Flutter in 2024?
I'm really interested to see how it goes with Apple Vision. You know, I'm high on the Apple Vision. I've seen a lot of things on Twitter about people already deploying some of their Flutter code onto Apple Vision, so we will be able to write Flutter apps for Vision. To what capacity, we'll still have to wait and see. With all of the 3D aspects of that, like of course we'll be able to run apps and screens, probably no problem. Actually making your Flutter app interact with the AR kit well and bringing in 3D models well, like I'm sure we'll be able to do it, but how well will we be able to do it? That is going to be the question. I would say if you really want to build something immediately for Vision, I wouldn't count on the Flutter support. It's one of those rare times I would say get into Swift UI because you're going to want to be quick with the Vision Pro release. Dart gets inline classes very soon, macros maybe in 6 months. Yeah, there's been fairly consistent minor updates for just the Dart language in general. A lot of quality of life things there. Flutter WASM in a few months, yep. So lots of good just general updates, but I think really now we're starting to get to the point with Flutter where it's just becoming a more mature framework. So we talked about in the beginning, seeing it take over more of the market share for actually deploying apps. That's what's most exciting to me because that gets staying power for Flutter, right? If Flutter gets to the point where it's the second most popular way to build an iOS app, that's pretty significant staying power.
What's the basis for that in 2023? Like where was Flutter in the App Store in 2023? Do you know that?
I don't have that graph. Any other questions?
Would you say that Flutter is kind of out of that risky window where Google could just like pull the plug any day?
A lot of people talk about that, and I think that's really why I included the concerning team things. That to me concerns me. Seeing 2 of the top engineers leave the team, that definitely concerns me. Flutter is not going to die, even if like Google pulled the plug. Flutter would suffer tremendously if Google stopped supporting it. There's no doubt there. But Google's already invested quite heavily. Like a lot of their own applications are getting rebuilt in Flutter. They rebuilt Google Earth in Flutter. They rebuilt Google Classroom in Flutter. The Google Pay app, the Google Play console app, it's all rebuilt in Flutter. So they're investing quite heavily in it internally, which gives me a lot of confidence because they're at least going to have to maintain those apps in Flutter, otherwise rebuild them again. So I think the future for Flutter is still quite bright. But yeah, always got to keep an eye on it. Google is notorious for killing things out of nowhere, so just got to be careful. Flutter is technically open source though, so it's not going to just die if Google disappeared. It'll just get a lot more messy probably.
What do you think about some of the changes in terms of like notifications and web apps and the ability to sort of treat a web app more like a native app? Yeah, that gap is closed in the last year.
Yeah.
So this framework versus framework kind of conversation is a little different when you think of an entirely different deployment model.
Yeah, I think the Flutter is uniquely positioned there again because we can build web apps and it has PWA support out of the box.
Yeah.
But it does increase the importance of the Flutter web requests that we went through today. The SEO support, the SSR support, and some of those things. Flutter needs to natively support those, I think. But yes, the push for mobile apps is kind of going backwards now, right? Because most of the reason people would build a mobile app is they want push notifications. They want better access to their users. They want some sort of feature like that. They either need access to phone sensors or they want push notifications, right? That is starting to go away because web apps are starting to get access to a lot of those items. So it will be interesting to see if there's a pullback more towards the web world. That being said, there is some advantage to being on app stores. Like just like SEO and the Google search engine is so important to nail, being in front of people searching for an app is very lucrative. Like you get a lot of organic downloads just from
So a platform or a framework lets you kind of do all three, which would be, web plus both native, maybe even more powerful than the other option. Yeah.
Flutter will mature for more desktop platforms over time too. Yeah, I think it was really interesting. I think it was very impressive, the initial benchmarks that came out of Flutter for desktop. The biggest competitor there is an Electron.js, which is what Slack, Discord, VS Code are all built in. And the normal performance benchmarks for Flutter desktop absolutely destroy Electron. Like the startup time, the bundle sizes, everything. So I think there's a lot of hope on Flutter desktop, some of these really popular apps getting rebuilt.
What do you think is the biggest opportunity for Flutter in 2024, and what's the biggest threat to it?
Biggest opportunity, I think, is really going to be around tools to make you quicker. I think there's still a lot of boilerplate in Flutter projects, and coming up with more code generation tools. There's a popular tool we briefly saw called Mason that allows you to easily spin up a lot of files. I think there's still a lot of opportunity to help make developers more efficient there with like CLI tools and things like that. Very Good Ventures has a great CLI tool. One of the big advantages GitX has over other platform or other state managements is they have a great CLI tool, which makes it very easy for developers to spin up things. So I think just tools like that help make Flutter development easier is probably the biggest opportunity. As well as testing. There's going to need to be a lot of new tools that help bridge the gap for Flutter and enterprise. There's more enterprises now trusting Flutter to build apps, but there's still a lot in that ecosystem that probably needs to be built out to rival a native development. Biggest risk is probably going to be some sort of implosion on the team. The culture things are definitely concerning. Right, I mean, they were talking about vision casting from Google CEO, right? So that is definitely worrisome, to me at least.
Looks like Randall's mentioned something about training on AI.
Training AI on recent Dart and Flutter, not older code. Yeah, I think that's going to get better and better. I've still been very impressed by both Cursor, which is a IDE built on top of VS Code that has AI built in, and then also just GitHub Copilot. I'm pretty impressed with it. I'm not using AI still to write significant chunks of code. I typically have it write comments for code that I write, and sometimes I'll try and have it write tests for code that I've written. So that's one really great part about Cursor. You can basically say, write tests for this file, and it will just try and spit out tests. Not always right. But a lot of times it gives you a good place to start. Codium is doing great. Yep, there's a lot of options there. I'm really looking forward to Project IDX, which is a Google project as well that I think is going to be really exciting.
What is that?
That's what I was briefly talking to Stephen about. Entirely web-based IDE built on top of VS Code that will allow you to also run a simulator in the browser. So this is really exciting for multiple reasons. Your development machine can be a very basic little laptop. You don't have to have all this operating system power anymore. And you can still have really quick compile times. It removes the limit for more people about building an iOS app. You've always had to have a Mac to build an iOS app, whether it's in the cloud somewhere, you're running a virtual machine, or actually owning a Mac. So being able to run an iOS simulator in browser is like a huge advantage. Marco, you use Project IDX. Do you enjoy it? Talking about free IDX access.
Is it open right now?
I'm on the wait list for sure. They haven't let me in yet. How rude. Awesome.
One thing I find interesting is Stack Overflow trends. You can kind of see, and of some of the other top ones you had, like Swift, Dart, React Native, and Kotlin, Flutter's trending way above the ones that you were talking about, which is always a good sign.
Yeah. We do Flutter.
I put in Flutter, Swift, Dart, React Native, and Kotlin. Just do Space Native, and it'll come. There you go.
Yeah, there's been some talk from people about, so yeah, Flutter is trending significantly above the others. There's been some talk recently about Kotlin multi-platform, building iOS apps with Kotlin. Haven't looked into that too much, but it's definitely something I need to at least keep the pulse of just in case that blows up. I always worry as well when a company has internally competing products, and I would say Kotlin multi-platform and Flutter would be competitors with each other, which worries me a little bit because they could compete there. The games challenge join. Are you talking about like the Flutter has challenges for building things? I saw they announced several of those. I'll have to look into that and join it so I can just get the IDX access.
I mean, contribute to the Flutter ecosystem.
Yeah, exactly. Build a game. I will do that for IDX access. Awesome. Well, we'll wrap up here. Thank you everybody that tuned in online. Hopefully, come to the next talk. Danielle's going to be talking about the Flutter Casual Games Toolkit, and that will definitely help you with this games challenge that Randall's been talking about. So come tune in for that. And yep.